We often picture ancient battles as a chaotic storm of noise war cries, clashing swords, and thundering horns. But one of the most fearsome armies in history, the Roman legions, built their empire on a foundation of silence. This wasn't a sign of fear, it was a weapon of unparalleled discipline and control. Today, we're diving into how this calculated quietness made Rome a dominant military force for centuries. When you think of the Roman army, you probably imagine soldiers in perfect formation, shields locked, marching with an unnerving calm. This image is accurate. Their strength wasn't just in their armor or weapons, but in their extraordinary discipline. Every soldier was a cog in a perfectly engineered machine, trained to act without hesitation. This collective discipline allowed them to perform complex maneuvers that would have been impossible for less organized forces. While their opponents, like the Gauls and Germanic tribes, used terrifying roars and chants to intimidate their enemies, the Romans chose a different approach. Their silence on the battlefield was a deliberate tactical choice. It served a critical purpose: clear communication. In the deafening chaos of combat, shouting orders over the din was impractical. Instead, Roman officers used visual signals and standards to direct their troops. The most revered of these was the Aquila, the legion's golden eagle. Every soldier's eyes were fixed on it, allowing for silent, precise coordination across the entire line. This meant formations stayed tight and movements were synchronized, even when surrounded by the enemy's noise. This doesn't mean the Romans fought in total silence. They simply replaced chaotic shouting with a more sophisticated system. Specialized instruments, like the straight tuba and the curved cornu, were used to transmit specific commands. Each sequence of notes had a precise meaning: advance, retreat, change formation. These clear, controlled signals cut through the noise of battle, ensuring every legionary knew exactly what to do. It was a language of sound designed for clarity, not just intimidation. Think of it as a battlefield orchestra where every note was a command, flawlessly executed by thousands of soldiers. One of the most iconic displays of this silent discipline was the testudo, or tortoise formation. To form this mobile fortress, soldiers had to lock their shields together on all sides and overhead, creating a near-impenetrable shell against arrows and projectiles. This maneuver required incredible precision and timing. A single soldier moving out of step could create a fatal gap in the formation. The quiet focus of the legionaries was essential. It allowed them to listen for the subtle cues from their centurions and move as one unified entity, turning a group of individuals into an unstoppable armored beast. Imagine facing that: a silent, advancing wall of steel, impervious to your attacks. Let's contrast this with Rome's adversaries. Noise was a central part of their warfare. The Greeks would begin battles with a paean, a thunderous chant to their gods, meant to call for divine favor and steel their nerves. The Gauls were famous for their terrifying battle cries, meant to shatter enemy morale before the first sword was even drawn. Similarly, Germanic warriors performed the Beretus, a chant that started as a low hum and swelled into a deafening roar. For these cultures, sound was both a psychological weapon and a way to build camaraderie. But the Romans were masters of turning their enemies' strengths into weaknesses. They understood the psychological power of sound and used it strategically, but on their own terms. A classic example comes from the rebellion of Queen Boudicca in Britain in 61 AD. Her massive army charged the much smaller Roman force. Screaming war cries and banging their shields, expecting to terrify the legions into breaking, the Romans answered with chilling silence. They stood their ground, a calm, unmoving line, letting the Britons' momentum and morale burn out. Then, just as the enemy was within range, the Romans unleashed their volley of javelins, the deadly pit. At that precise moment, they erupted into their own unified, disciplined war cry and charged. The sudden, controlled explosion of sound, combined with the devastating volley, shattered the Britons' confidence and led to a decisive Roman victory. They didn't just absorb the enemy's psychological attack. They turned it back on them with devastating effect. However, the Roman army wasn't static. It evolved over its long history. By the 4th century, the empire's borders were vast, and its legions were increasingly filled with soldiers from frontier provinces, including former enemies like the Germanic tribes. These new recruits brought their own traditions with them. Roman commanders, ever the pragmatists, began to see the value in practices like the Beretus chant. They allowed auxiliary units to adopt these war cries, recognizing their power to boost morale and inspire ferocity, as long as it didn't compromise the core discipline of the legion. This adaptability is yet another hallmark of Rome's military genius. They were willing to incorporate new ideas while holding onto the principles that made them strong. In the end, the story of Roman military dominance is a story of control, whether through silent maneuvering or a sudden, synchronized roar. Every action was calculated. Their use of silence was not a passive absence of noise, but an active tool of war, a testament to their training, discipline, and tactical brilliance. It was the sound of an empire being forged, not by chaotic rage, but by cold, quiet mastery. That quiet confidence is what echoed across the ancient world, heralding the advance of Rome. Thanks for watching. If you found this look into Roman military tactics interesting, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments what other historical topics you'd like to see us cover. See you next time.